Stage Left Planet, and I'm your host, Wabrita Wimbush, and today's episode is Rape. Don't be ashamed, know your worth. Yes. And I want to discuss with you my experience as a rape survivor and how having been raped has impacted my life and my views and attitudes toward dating, love, and marriage, and my views of men as well. And want to discuss this with you because I am very proud of many beautiful women that have been coming for men and women. A lot of many beautiful women and men that have been coming forward to discuss their experiences as rape survivors, their experiences of rape and being a rape survivor. And my experience was at the time didn't seem quite traumatic, but I began to notice that it impacted me over time. And it brought to my attention how I viewed myself and my worth as an individual. I want to start by telling you I was raped when I was working on my second bachelor's degree, and it was by one of my classmates. We had a study date, and I didn't think that he was found me appealing sexually at all or in any way. Not really even as a friend per se either. We had classes with one another before, and we'd had classes with one another before, and he would sit near me usually, but I didn't think anything of it at all. I barely noticed it until just before I started recording this video, and I thought about, wait a minute. In my other classes, he was sitting near me too. How did I not notice that? And so I he one it was the beginning of the semester. We had a class together, and he asked me could he share my book with me because he didn't have a book. And the reason he wanted to share with me is because we had a quiz. I think it was a quiz that was coming up. And so he wanted to prepare for the quiz, and I understood that because there were times in the past when didn't get a book for class, and I asked people to could I borrow their book or make copies from their book, and they let me do it. So I was understanding regarding that. Well, fast forward to with us meeting to study, and it was interesting because my mother tripped when I told her my classmate and I are going to study together at his house. Usually she wouldn't say anything. And now, mind you, at that time if I wasn't 23, I was about to make, no, let me think. I wasn't 23 yet. I was still 22 years old at that time. And my mother, she usually didn't think much. She usually, didn't think too much of that kind of thing because she knew I was an adult and she trusted my judgment most of the time. So she trusted my judgment most of the time. But that particular night, she was fussing because he called me and he said, "Oh yeah, you want us?" It was the day before the quiz, and he said, "Oh yeah, you want to get together and study?" And I was like, "Okay." And at that time, I was having problems with my boyfriend at the time because he was cheating on me and things. And so I was like, well, it's like I didn't even take into because, oh yeah, I'm going to another guy's house, even though I got a boyfriend. Because I was just like, okay, we studying. And I was talking to him about my relationship problems, trying to get his advice from a male perspective, right? And like, he was good looking. As I said, he was good looking, a little shorter than me, but good looking and real muscular and stuff, right? And but even then, with me having been really overweight at the time, I didn't think he was interested in me or looking at me in that way at all. And I'm a person, I'm very gregarious, and he's quiet. And usually, I just kind of figure, okay, I'm just not his type. I'm very gregarious. And at that time, just, had a very like bubbly type personality, big bubbly personality back then. And so I just didn't think he was looking at me in that way. Well, when my mother didn't want me to go, but then she went ahead and said, let me go. And I went, he came to pick me up, and I went with him, and we went to his place. And I should I should have known to just tell him take me back home on the way to his place, because the cemetery where my father's body is interred is like on the road, same road where that guy's apartment complex was located, right? And I asked him, can we, when I saw we were about to head, pass in front of that cemetery, I asked him, can we go another way? And he ignored me and kept driving. I should have just opened the door and jumped off the car and rolled over to the side of the road and walked home right then. But because I explained to him, okay, well, I don't want to pass in front of this. It was Gilbert Cemetery, and I'm like, I don't want to pass in front of Gilbert Cemetery. That's where my dad's body is interred, and him and my great great no, my great grandfather, great grandmother, great aunt, let's see, great aunts, great uncle, and I had a great aunt and a great uncle there, and there's a family plot, and they're right at the front near the entrance. And so I don't even go to funerals, because I don't want that to be a memory of people that I love at all. I don't want to remember that. I don't want it in my memory. I if somebody I know goes to someone I love funeral, if they go to that person's funeral, I don't want them to tell me anything about it. Don't take pictures at the funeral. I don't want to know. I know that person is alive, that all souls belong to the Lord, and that's how I want them in my mind. Okay. I don't want to be thinking about no cemetery and funeral home and all that all that stuff. I don't want to be thinking about that, though. The funeral home that took care of my mother's body, Hall Day, was fantastic, and they were beautiful and wonderful to me. Um, but moving on, when we got to the guy's apartment, that guy was acting very erratic, and he had this big, big window and that's where his sofa was in front of. His sofa was in front of his window, and that's where we were sitting. And he kept acting so crazy, and people were calling him, and he was cussing them out and telling them to leave him alone. And he kept looking out the window and looking out the door. Then he got his gun. It was very weird, right? Then after a while, because we was talk about the lesson once in a while. I'm sitting there talking about my boyfriend being foolish at the time, and trying to think of, okay, how can I leave here without walking out the door and getting shot? Because that's how he was acting, like it was people outside, trying to get him. Hold on, y'all. Okay, let's see something. All right, yeah, trying to be modest. Anyway, he was acting like people were outside trying to get him. So I was like, okay, how can I get out of here other than jumping out the back window? If he got one, how can I get out of here without getting shot? Then eventually he asked me, okay, you want to move to my bedroom? I was like, okay, because I'm like, it was better than sitting in front of this picture window, because he said it was his girlfriend calling him and harassing him. But I didn't believe it, because I'm like, okay, why? But his ex-girlfriend, he claimed. I'm like, okay, if that's your ex-girlfriend calling you and harassing you, then why you got the gun and you acting all scared and stuff and all? And I noticed he had things that seemed like a college student would struggle to afford, especially since he had like a regular, just, he worked at a local store. And I didn't think he was in management or anything. I'm like, okay, how can he afford all of this? Is what my thoughts were. And he even had like a new late model truck and stuff. So I'm like, okay, how can he afford all this stuff? And then I was like, oh, this dude had probably deal drugs with some of them people he do work for, or somebody after him, an enemy after him or something. And so I was just I didn't know what to do. So when he asked me, "Oh, you want to move? Want to go back into my bedroom?" And I was like, "Yeah," because I'm like, And he could when we were walking toward the bedroom, he cut the light off like he wasn't at home in that front room, well, his den. And so I didn't think nothing of it because I just figured he was being strategic, right? So we got in this bedroom, we was sitting there talking, and so I had the book, and I was like, okay, yeah, now we really need to focus. Now we really, really need to focus on studying. And so I was like, okay. And so we was, I was talking, then all of a sudden he sat, I sat at the edge of the bed because he didn't have a desk or nothing like that. I should have just sat on the floor. I should have sat on the floor. And so he was, I sat on the edge of the bed, and he was sitting next to me. Then all of a sudden, he got to kissing me and pushing me back and things like that. And so I don't want to go into detail or nothing like that. But let's just say, even though I was bigger than him, he was, had more muscle than what I did. So, he had his way, and I will say, and this is to people who choose not to fight back, don't feel bad. I didn't fight back like a lot. Like I ain't punch him or kick him like I probably normally would have, because I was aware that he had a gun. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm big and he in shape. And if he catch up to me or I get in his sights, he might shoot me and kill me. Or try to pistol whip me or something. So I am not going. This time I ain't gonna fight back. If the gun wasn't in proximity, if the gun wasn't in proximity, I'd take him down or at least sit on him, right? And so after that, we went to class the next day, and our teacher, it was so interesting because one of the things he started asking us about, and it was weird because my teacher, he didn't even notice that my classmate wasn't sitting next to me like he normally would either. And he asked him about that. Oh man, you're not sitting where you usually sit, huh? And there's somebody that pulled up outside. If you hear music, okay. And my classmate, he got all nervous, and then my teacher started talking about rape, because our degree is in my second degree is in criminal justice. So of course we discuss issues about crime, topics of crime. So he started talking to us about rape, and he asked, what would be a reason why a person wouldn't fight back? if they were raped, or like he asked if you were raped, would you fight back? And if you and if you don't or you do, why wouldn't you fight back, or why would you fight back? And some of the females in my class, some of the women in my class, they were like, "Oh, I will fight back," blah 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 blah. And I spoke up. I was like, well, I wouldn't fight back. When I started talking, my classmate looked like he just wanted Scotty to beam him up onto the Starship Enterprise. And my teacher looked at him and said, "What's the matter, man? You looking mighty nervous." And I thought to myself, oh, wow, he's done this before. And I talked about this with another person who also majored in criminal justice. She was in that class with us. I think I talked about it much later. And she was saying how, I think she told me that someone else complained about that guy too. I had no idea. I should have listened to my mother though, but I had no idea. And it impacted that event. I didn't think impacted me a lot, but when I reflected on it and how I reacted to him, because after number one, after the event, it's almost like I just basically had a dissociative thing, and that occurs to me like if when things have a traumatic things happen to me, I have a tendency to disassociate myself and disconnect emotionally. Otherwise, it's just gone. It's a lot. It's too trying to cope and handle it. It had been, But now that I'm saved and my heart is converted, I can go to God with those things and actually face those issues instead of avoiding them. But um I was late, and I didn't want to do it. I was because at first I was like, okay, I'm not. And even my rationalization, because I should have reported him to the police. I should have reported that, but I didn't because I felt, guilty because I knew I wasn't a virgin. And I'm like, well, you ain't no virgin. I devalued myself. It's like, well, you ain't no virgin. Well, just, go, don't worry. Just, you know. And so I shouldn't have done that. And when I was, my period was late after that. And when I approached, because I was like, oh, snap, because my period usually is never, especially then, never late. Never late. So I was like, look, I'm late. And he was like, well, get rid of it. And I was looking at him and I smiled and like, oh yeah. But then in my mind, I'm like, well, I just won't tell you about it. And when you see my belly, you see the progress of the pregnancy, you just will have a question in your mind. That's all. But thank God I wasn't pregnant. Thank God I wasn't pregnant. My period came eventually, but I just in him saying that to me, I was thinking, I know you did not. Yeah, you force yourself on me, and then now that this might possibly be about to have a child, are you stupid? Anyway, um, and even then, and then the other part is this: it was cold, it was cool, and I had forgotten my coat at his place. So I had to go to him a second time. Did I go a second? It might have been at the same time. And ask him with a smile on my face, so he'll do it. Could you bring me my coat? And so I ended up, could you bring me my coat? And so, it was awful. And he didn't sit near me no more for the rest of the semester. And then I noticed, like, even this, and this is way after that happened, way after he raped me. One time I saw him in the union, and he was at the ATM, or the union on campus, and he was at the ATM, and he didn't see me, but I walked way, way away from, just tried to be where he didn't see me. And I felt scared, and it was the weirdest feeling because I had never felt like that before. I'm like, that's, I'm like, okay, well, that must have impacted me more than what I thought it had. I really did. I really did realize that. And as I reflect on it now, I'm like, my self esteem was like really, really not where it should have been. It was really low for me to have internalized that, not spoken out. And I'm a fighter. I speak out against what's wrong. I speak out against injustices. I've burned many bridges about that. And only this dress would act right anyway. And it's so pretty. Anyway, um honestly, I'm sharing this because I've mentioned that I've been raped before as I've had talked about various women's rights issues, right? Particularly as it pertains to abortion. I mentioned this before, I've written about it before, and I wanted to share my experience and to let people know. Don't be ashamed to speak up, and don't be afraid to speak up, and don't devalue yourself. Even if you've had sex with everybody in town, if somebody rapes you, your value is no less than someone who is a virgin. And if you are a virgin, don't think that you are damaged. Do not feel like you are damaged goods because you've been raped or molested. You are not. You are not damaged goods, okay? You are not damaged goods. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, okay? You are not damaged goods. Let's look at it in the KJV. Yes. Psalm 139, 14 through 16. Okay. Let's see. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. And you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Okay. So don't ever think that having been raped or being abused, taken advantage of, devalues you as a person. Okay. Don't ever think that. Ever. Don't think rape, molestation, or abuse, being taken advantage of devalues you, period. It devalues that abuser, okay? That devalues them. But I wanted to take the time to come forth and tell you this. I wanted to come forth to tell you this. And this is Stage Left Planet. I'm your host, Warita Winbush. And this episode is Rape. Know your worth and speak out. Focus on God.